It's the Fantasy Grill. We are 1 week away from joining us, having guests on the show, expert analysis on the Fantasy Grill. We're going to be talking about football fantasy, basketball fantasy, answering your questions. This week, we're going to focus on wide receivers. We're going to give you some overvalued wide receivers, undervalued wide receivers, and we were sent a report that said here are the top 10 players that are being overvalued regardless of position. We're going to go through the list 10 through 1 and tell you if they were right or wrong. Are they overvalued? So let's jump right into that list. I'm Anthony K, by the way. This is the Fired Up Network. You can find me at sports_fluent on TikTok, on Twitter, on IG. Send your questions to Anthony K at sportsfluent.com. So let's go through the list. Right off the bat, we're starting at number 10. It's a tight end, Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, here's the thing about Dalton Schultz. All of this is based on where you're drafting your player. So is Dalton Schultz a top 5 tight end in the NFL in terms of fantasy? The answer is no. Therefore, are you picking him in the top 5 rounds? The answer is you shouldn't be. So if you see that he's going in the first 5 rounds in your draft, let him go. The value of tight ends after those top 3 or 4 drops drastically, so let him move. So to answer the question, in your draft, if he's going in the first 5 rounds, he is definitely overvalued. If it's below, well then, you're getting a steal. Look for him in kind of rounds 8 or 9. All right, number 9 on the list. This is an interesting one because Deebo Samuel is going around the 2nd round in most drafts. And I don't know why people are scared of him in the 2nd round. He's going to get you PPR points, which is what we talk about most times. He's going to run the ball out of the backfield. And so he's going to get you points in the air, points on the ground. He's going to get you receptions. He's also going to get you touchdowns. Trey Lance is going to look for his safety net. It's either going to be George Kittle or most likely the very versatile Deebo Samuel. He's the guy that I think he's going to look to when he's in trouble, when he's scrambling. So I think Deebo Samuel is actually, I don't want to say undervalued in the 2nd round, but if he's going in the 1st round, then yes, overvalued. But most likely he's going in your 2nd round. Don't be afraid of Deebo Samuel. Next up, it's Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, I'm a big fan of Josh Jacobs. Let's be honest. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Las Vegas with the Raiders. And you're going to have to really be careful on Josh Jacobs, right? Because he's going to be your flex. He's not going to be a top 20 running back in a PPR format, which you're probably playing in. So if he's going anywhere above RB20, you're going to want to stay away and look for some other values. Or like I said, there's some later value picks at the running back position. Next week, in fact, we're going to talk about a 0 running back strategy. So join us next week for that one. So Josh Jacobs, where he's going, definitely he is. I agree with the list of overvalued. The next one, another running back, is Antonio Gibson, who I was actually high on, but listen, he's not going to get the touches he needs. But he's also going very low. I believe I stole him very, very late. And so he's a good pickup to have on your bench. But if you're, again, looking at him even as a flex option, he's a borderline flex option. So if you're getting him anything, again, in those top 25, he's not going to be, again, if you're a 12-team PPR, you better be getting him as, RB40, RB45 if you want him to be a high value pick. Then it's David Montgomery, another running back who, this one I disagree with quite a bit. I think David Montgomery has top 10, top 15 running back potential. He should be one of the first. He can be your RB1, preferably if you've taken a wide receiver in the 1st round, right? But he is going to be RB15 at worst in this Bears offense. That, let's be honest, someone's going to have to score. He's going to be the one running the ball. They're going to want to protect Justin Fields, who's just kind of coming in. And he's I don't say he's a rookie quarterback, but he's obviously very new to the quarterback position. They're going to want to try and protect him. What they saw last year, and here's the thing, The GM, the coach, got fired. Part of the reason for being fired was that they weren't running the ball enough and protecting Justin Fields. So I believe you can get a steal with David Montgomery. So I don't believe he's overvalued, not at all. Because like I said, I think that's a top 15 running back. Kenneth Walker and Rashard Penny were put together on this list. So it's those Seattle running backs. And I know what I just said about Montgomery in the sense that they're going to run him on a Bears offense on a team that's going to be losing a lot. Kenneth Walker and Rashard Penny are two players that are on a team that's also going to be losing a lot, which means they're going to probably have to throw to catch up. But here's the thing. The difference between Montgomery and these two is that these two are going to split carries. So unless you have a deep bench where you can carry both of them and see if one gets hurt, if one gets pushed to the back, neither one of these, I don't believe, is going to be a workhorse. We've seen Pete Carroll, the way that he runs his offense, it rarely does have a workhorse back. So when you're looking at a team that's going to be in bad situations where they're going to be losing, they're going to be throwing, they don't have that workhorse back, carries are going to be split. It's a bad situation for both those guys. I'm actually staying away from everyone in the Seattle offense, with maybe the exception of DK. He might be the only one, but in terms of the running game, I'm staying away from both Penny and Walker. And again, this is strictly fantasy. This has nothing to do with the actual game of football, because I do actually really like Kenneth Walker, but that's a story for another day. All right. Next up, Nick Chubb. I'm really high on Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, I picked Nick Chubb up I drafted him in the second round of my draft. I was the sixth pick, and it made complete sense because I needed a running back. I ended up with Cooper Kupp in round number 1. And Nick Chubb is going to be the focal point of that offense, especially for the first 11 weeks when they're starting Jacoby Brissett at running back. And their wide receiver, Amari Cooper's nice. They've got a nice tight end. So there's opportunities, for him as your RB1. I think Nick Chubb is a top tier running back. So top 10, RB10, top 10 this season. So getting him in the second round, that's not a stretch at all. So no, I don't believe to the question of the day, which as a reminder, we're going through a list of the top 10 players who were listed as overvalued in NFL fantasy. The top 2 were quarterbacks. And the reason that that they're up there is because too many people are picking quarterbacks way too early. There are so many good quarterbacks in the league, especially when it comes to fantasy, and the drop off between 1 and 12 isn't that great that anyone who's reaching for a Joe Burrow or a Josh Allen, it's a wasted pick because you couldn't be getting some value at the running back position or the wide receiver position. There's other positions where the drop off is more significant before the top tier guys in the second tier. So if you just look at we'll start in the AFC. So in the AFC, and I'm going to go by division, you've got 4 quarterbacks in the West that are all can be your QB1, right? So you got Patrick Mahomes, obviously, Derek Carr, to the surprise of some, Russell Wilson, and Justin Herbert. All 4 perfectly good quarterback ones for your fantasy league. We go to the AFC North. AFC North a little bit. Well, that's where you got Burrow and Lamar Jackson. We're up to 6 now quarterbacks that could be your RB1. Now, Deshaun Watson, unfortunately, for fantasy owners, won't be back until week 12, so he's out of the picture. And then in Pittsburgh, you have either Kenny Pickett, might be a dark horse, or Mitch Trubisky. So fine, I'm going to stay away from those 2 guys, but we're still have 6 viable picks. We now go to the AFC South, where you have Matt Ryan. Listen, you can get Matt Ryan like undrafted, and he's going to be good, not great, but serviceable as a QB1 in most leagues. Ryan Tannehill, I wouldn't draft him, so I might stay away from him. Trevor Lawrence is going to surprise him. I don't think you want him as your number 1. So let's leave him out for now. So we're at 7. And then I'm sure we missed somebody. Oh, yes. And Davis Mills. I really like Davis Mills, but I'm not going to draft Davis Mills. So we're still at 7. And then we go to the North. Tua can be your QB1. Absolutely. I think Tua is going to have a great fantasy year because of his wide receiver. Listen, that way that team is set up, he is going to be a good fantasy option. So that's 8. You now have Josh Allen in Buffalo, of course. I'm going to stay away from Mac Jones because of his inconsistency being in year 2, but you could make a reach for him. And then in the Jets, obviously, Zach Wilson. So I've already got eight quarterbacks that are legit QB1s. Even the ones that are borderline, I left them out. And I just did the AFC, right? So now if I go to the NFC, you've got Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. There you go. I'm at 11. I don't actually even need any more. Kirk Cousins, again, Kirk Cousins as a fantasy option is a good option that you can get, again, very late. So don't reach for guys like, so that's why I agree that Burrow and Josh Allen are overvalued, is because if you look at the quarterback landscape, you can get any one of these quarterbacks. And I missed a ton, but I just gave you 11 just like that. And I didn't even go through one of the conferences, but for 3 guys. So definitely overvalued there. Okay. Now we're gonna stick to what we came here for, which is the wide receivers, and we're going to talk about overvalued and undervalued. So we'll kind of bounce back and forth between a few, but my number one undervalued wide receiver comes from a team. I drafted him, and I drafted him in the last round because everyone was shying away from him. Robert Woods, in a run-heavy offense. I get it. In a run-heavy offense, is ADP 48th, 14th round, which means in most leagues he's not even getting drafted. He will be a top 30 wide receiver. He is slated to be and will be the number 1 wide receiver in Tennessee. People forgot how good he was, I think, when he was on the Rams. And listen, again, I know it's a run-heavy offense, but they got to throw. And who are they going to throw to? They're going to throw to Robert Woods. Robert Woods is going to be the steal of the draft. He's probably that guy from the wide receiver position that almost all the teams that win fantasy this year, that win the championship, will have Robert Woods on their roster. Another one, and it's interesting because I go back and forth on Deontay Johnson. So he slipped out of the top 15 by most, but if you look at what's been going on, he has the second most targets per game of any wide receiver, 4th in total targets because he missed a couple of games, and 195. That puts him at 8th in the NFL. So here's a guy who's getting volume receptions, but I'll tell you this: I started him as being undervalued. I'm now saying he's overvalued. I think the Pittsburgh offense is changing. I think you're going to see whoever the quarterback is, let's assume it's Mitch Trubisky, distribute the ball a little bit more. They're going to throw less than they usually do, right? This isn't Ben Roethlisberger's chuck it offense anymore. Najee Harris obviously is going to be the focal point. The tight end is going to get some reception. So I think you're going to see the ball being distributed, but don't look for him to be, I think he's going to be outside of the top 15 looking in. So again, if he's going anywhere before that top 15 wide receiver, just let whoever drafts him draft him. I would move on from Deontay Johnson. My dog agrees.
Shots fired! Shots fired!
Next, we got up this one. If you can believe a first round wide receiver is undervalued. Justin Jefferson, in my estimation, is going to put up Cooper Kupp last year like numbers this year. I think he's going to flirt with the Triple Crown in terms of receptions, yards, and touchdowns in this Minnesota offense. I get it. He's got Adam Thielen and Delvin Cook, and Kirk Cousins going to have to share the ball between those guys. But Justin Jefferson, for the first 2 seasons, has more yards than any other wide receiver in the history of the NFL by a lot. And I think this is his, if it's possible for a guy that's not going to surprise anybody, this is Justin Jefferson's breakout year. So Justin Jefferson, he's the guy that's going to lead your team to a fantasy championship. And at the end of the season, we'll probably be telling the Vikings, as he should. Now, last, we're going to end on someone who's undervalued. And he's undervalued because, is he the most talented, the most skilled wide receiver, even on his team? People will argue and say, no, he's not. However, the quarterback, Hall of Fame MVP quarterback who's going to be throwing the ball, is very big on trust. trust, and he trusts. Aaron Rodgers trusts Allen Lazard. So until further notice, Lazard's going to be the number one, at worst, the number 2 wide receiver in Green Bay. You know they're going to throw the ball a lot. This year, although, they have a good defense, I think Aaron Jones takes a little bit of a step back because they're going to give some more carries to A.J. Dillon, but they're still going to have to, look, it's Aaron Rodgers. When you have Aaron Rodgers on your team, regardless of if you have a good running game and a good defense, you're going to throw the ball. Allen Lazard is that guy that I think most people are overlooking. And again, he's not really getting drafted very high, and he's going to be, one of those top 30 receivers that you should have on your team. So let's kind of recap again. Robert Woods, undervalued. Allen Lazard, undervalued. Justin Jefferson, if possible, undervalued. Like, you could take Justin Jefferson 1 overall in your draft. I wouldn't do it, but it's not crazy. It's not ridiculous.
That's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say that.
It's not ridiculous to say that, to have him number 1, to have him go 5th in your draft. Not normally you won't do that for a wide receiver, but Justin Jefferson, I believe this year is going to be that exception. And then be very, very careful. I would be a little bit scared of Deontay Johnson. All right, so that's it for this week in the Fantasy Grill. New format starting next week. We're going to be bringing on some guests, answering more of your questions. You won't just have to listen to me telling you who to draft and not to draft. And obviously, once the NFL season starts, we're going to sit and let you know who to add, who to drop, and what trades to make. Until next time, I'm Anthony K, and now you're more fluent.